Here we are. Good morning to all the people who are joining us in our inspirational conversation. Today, we have the pleasure of having with us two wonderful people, two wonderful persons. We have Macdella Cooper. She's an activist, she's a politician, she's philanthropic. She's doing a wonderful social work around Africa, especially in Liberia, where she's from Liberia. And her life, it turns around Africa, Liberia, and New York City, where she's settled sometimes. Then is sharing us this meeting is Jonas Bulifa. He's going to be interviewed with me. And he studied anthropology. He's a social worker, activist, and related with the Green Party in Norway. So thank you very much to both of us, both of you of joining us. And let's start for the very beginning. Macdella, can you tell us about your childhood, how everything starts, what moves you in this spirit that you have?
Well, Pablo, first of all, I want to say thank you for having me on here, and to Jonas, it's an honor to share this platform with you. I will, one of my mentors says that the sweetest speeches are the shortest ones. So I'll keep that question very short. My childhood started in a small village in West Africa, in a country called Liberia. And my village was called Yanyankan. I was born to a teenage mom, and my brothers and I were born out of wedlock, and her family were very conservative, Christian, church-going people. And so it was sort of an embarrassment to them that my mom, out of wedlock, had 3 children without being married, and my father was gone. He got a scholarship to the United States. And so he just left her a little note and said, look, you're on your own, I'm gone. And so my life started in this very small village. And because my mom didn't have the means, she took my 2 brothers and I, and she gave us to her grandparents, not her parents, but her grandparents. And her grandparents were 2 very old. I believe they were in their 70s already by the time I came around. And so as a little baby, I was taken and given to these 2 very old people, but they also had a farm, a big farm. They grew rubber. Their business was rubber. So they were producing rubber and other vegetables like rice and cassava and all these other things. Like I guess it's called yucca as well. And so I grew up on this farm with my great-grandparents, but it also had lots of other children. So it was like a big house with lots of kids, about 25 kids like myself. So I grew up just figuring out who my brother was, who my cousin was. Everybody was just one big family. And I lived there until I was about 9 years of age, went to school every day. I had 1 pair of shoes per year. I had 1 doll per year. On Christmas Day, they gave me that doll. I played with that doll, and that doll was then put away for the rest of the year until Christmas again the next year. And so this was normal life to me. We didn't have electricity. We didn't have running water in the house. We had to go back in the yard to the creek to fetch water. On Saturday, we did everything. We washed clothes and put them on the line. So this was my early beginning. And by 1984, my mother had gone. She took herself back to nursing school. She became a nurse, an operating nurse. She did well. She got married and to a wonderful man who was the head of UNCHR. And then eventually she sent her sister to fetch me and my brothers from the village. And so by 1984, I finally came to Monrovia, and I saw lights in a big city for the first time. So that was the early part of my existence.
Wow. Very, very amazing, very interesting. And there was can you share with us 2 or 3 topics or things that marks your childhood, like something specifics, something that happened, maybe living in the farm, or the first time you arrived to the city, or what that moves something in you? Right.
Well, in the early beginning, as a child, you always look for your parents, because every human being, no matter what, we look for our parents, and not being able to find someone that I belong to marked my early years as a child. And the interesting thing is I didn't feel sorry for myself, but I felt sorry for my brothers. Because whatever I was feeling, that yearning I was feeling for a parent, a hug from a parent, or just to approval from a parent, because a baby always look at the parents for approval. But I didn't have that growing up. And so I always thought about the other kids, although I had this yearning for a parent. But then I was thinking about those other kids who didn't have parents as well, because my grandparents were too old to hug us, to tell us they love us, to care for us. They just gave us instructions. They were Bible believing people, and they said, we're going to give you two things in your life: education and the Bible. That's it. That's all they were going to provide for us.
And it works. And it works.
Sorry?
And it works.
Of course, it did to some degree, but at some point, as a human, we need a little bit more than just an education and understanding of good, the good things that we must do in this world. We want good also, and that good starts with maybe a hug, some sort of approval that someone loves you and someone cares about you. My grandparents were not into that. And so that definitely marked my very early stages. And then the next thing, when I came to the city, I came from the village. I barely spoke English, or the English I spoke, no one understood me in the city, because it was village English I was speaking, right? It was sort of not dialect, but it was some sort of broken English or some old English. And so when I came to the city, everyone in my new school, all of the kids, knew that I definitely didn't belong. I came from somewhere, maybe another spaceship or an alien spaceship or somewhere, but they knew I didn't come from Monrovia. And so a lot of kids asked me, why did I talk so funny? So those are two things. And so I always had to justify why I spoke the way I spoke.
Very incredible. Amazing. Very, very nice. Very nice. And how many kids were living with you there in the farm at the beginning?
About 25 children. And they were in the same 25 children. They were in the same predicament as I was in. Their parents could not afford to take care of them. Their parents were either too young or didn't have the resources. So they just brought them to these old people, because these old people were Bible believing people. They were missionaries to some degree. And so they had a heart to care for others. But caring for others, as I said, it just means I'll give you an education, food on your plate, a roof over your head, and Jesus, the love of Jesus. That's all they were going to give you. Wow. Never go close for a hug. You might get a smack.
Who are the key people in your life today?
The key people in my life today. Well, that's very interesting. It depends on the subject for the day. I have key people for business, business mentors, and have people for politics, people I talk to for politics. And I talk to people about maybe I don't really talk to people about my personal matters, because personal matters is something I deal with myself. So, but key people in my life, I would say my godmother is the second part of the story. So I go to Monrovia. I lived there by 1989. There's a war that disrupted in the country. And so I'm about 12, 13 years of age. And this war reached Monrovia. I'm 13. And my father is killed. My stepfather who raised me is killed. My mom she runs away for protection. She takes a 3 younger baby that she had with my stepfather. She goes away. I'm left at home with my 2 brothers. And we get mixed up in this civil war. The soldiers, the rebels, wants to recruit me as a sex slave. And my brothers, they want to recruit my brothers to go fight the war. And we said, no, we come from a family where we're not supposed to do bad things to others. And so although there was no adult supervision over our life, we could have done anything we wanted to do, but we were raised to do unto others as you want them to do unto you. So I was not allowed to go be a sex slave for anyone, right? So I had to change my entire look. I had to take my earrings off. I had to make my hair crazy, wear boys' clothing, so I'm not attractive to these rebels, because these rebels had guns. And for a young 13-year-old girl to survive during the Civil War, they had to provide sex for these soldiers in order to have food to eat. But again, I grew up in a household where those things were not permissible by my parents, and so I couldn't do it. So my brothers and I starved, and eventually we ended up in a refugee camp in Ivory Coast, where we left Monrovia and we tried to find our way. And of course, along the way, we were caught up in ambush. We're caught up in so many things that young 13-year-old children should not see, or teenagers should not see. People being killed, rebels taking our babies out of pregnant women's belly. The horrible things about war, people's house bombing, and all these destructions and atrocities that we went through during the Civil War. So when you ask about relevant people in my life today, as a young refugee living in the Ivory Coast, which is the bordering country of Liberia, we were rescued. I was rescued by an American woman working for the U.S. Embassy. Her name is Pamela Brogdon. This woman just saw me going to church every Sunday. And she asked me, she says, why are you in church every Sunday by yourself? And I explained the entire story I just explained to you. I'm a war refugee from Liberia, and we are in Ivory Coast just waiting to have American visa to go to my mother, because my mother was now in America, in New York. And so this lady was so sad to hear a story of a 14-year-old girl and the life I had lived. This American woman was just in tears. And I said, but these American people, they're so strange. Why is she so sad? Because for me, that was normalcy. But for her, that is something no one should ever experience. And so she then now becomes a relevant person in my life. She rescues me. She takes me to her home. She gives me an academic scholarship to go to a little English school that was there, helped me with our documents. Eventually, 2.5 years later, we get a visa to come to America. And so that's how I end up, having American green card. So I came to America, and America says, welcome to your new home. Here's a green card. You can live here as long as you want. And so I go to high school, I go to the university, a College of New Jersey, did my 4 years, graduated, went to work for corporate America. But that woman, Pamela Brogdon, today she is still very much present in my life. She's like a second mother to me. And, so when you talk about who's relevant in my life, she's one person for sure.
She brought you to another life.
Right.
So it's a first mother and a second mother. It's very
Right.
clear, very clear.
I wanted to ask you, Macdella, if there's a moment in your life that established a before and the after, and maybe you just describe that moment.
No, actually,
or is there another one? Yeah.
Jonas, if I were to tell you a moment that divided the two. So I'm working in corporate America, I'm making lots of money. I'm very successful in America. I do well everywhere I go. People really like me a lot, and because I'm different. And there's something different about me, and they want to know why am I different. And so I meet a lot of important people. Paul Allen became a very good friend of mine, the co-founder of Microsoft. He became a good friend. He invites me on holidays all the time. I work for Ralph Lauren. I meet the governor of New York. I meet a lot of people, but now has my success come on hand, I keep thinking about the people who weren't as successful as I was, the young girls who were forced to then become sex slaves for the soldiers, right? Just to survive. But I was free from that. I left the war without any physical scars, but I left the war with a lot of emotional scars. And coming to the United States, when I landed, I had to register into school. So I was still on the bandwagon to go and obtain an education. I went to high school. I got a full academic scholarship to go to any college of my choice in America. I went to the College of New Jersey, which is right next to Princeton University. And so I go into corporate America, but remember now, I have not dealt with the scars of the war, the memories of those things I saw, the experiences, and how much my brothers suffered, the image of my brothers. I never looked at myself. I'm not a person to always look at my suffering. I take the level of suffering I'm going through and I apply it to the next person and think, how much more are they going through? Because I know one thing for sure, God has given me, or this creator that created us and created me, has given me this extraordinary ability to deal with pain and stress. But the one thing God has not given me, or this creator has not given me, is the ability to see somebody else's suffering. I can never be free of it. So human suffering has become this thing that really just, I just can't see other people suffer. I can see myself suffer. I'm cool. I'm fine. Now, so I'm working in America. Everything is going well. I'm being invited by all these high profile people. I'm the, friend of everyone. I'm one of the social names of New York City. But then I decided it's not enough. There is more to life than me going through all of what I went through. What is the meaning of this existence? There must be a meaning of it. So I go on this journey to find out the meaning of my existence. And what I came up with was to start a foundation to give back. And so I started the Macdella Cooper Foundation in 2003. I got all my friends. I said, look, from now on, if you want to know me, you have to contribute to my foundation. If you don't, I don't need to know you. So that, to your question, Jonas, was a dividing point, right?
I see.
I party with a lot of people, and I tell you, I party well. Every social event across the world, I was invited. What was this? Monaco, Saint-Tropez, St. Moritz, everywhere we went. Now, life had found its meaning for me. It was my moment to give back to the country from where I came. The nothingness that was there, I needed to change it into something that was meaningful, because everywhere I went, people saw me and said, there's something different about you. What is it? Right? And so I needed to make that place not just Macdella Cooper being good from Liberia, but Liberia being just as good as what people see in Macdella Cooper. So that was a defining moment. And that's when I left a lot of people behind, right? And then the people who actually saw something in me and in my country, and it could at least help, even if it was not giving resources, it was just making connections and contact. Those people became meaningful to me. And that's why someone like Paul Allen, when I told Paul Allen, I said, hey, Paul, look, I want to start a foundation. He goes, start a foundation, I'll give you a check. And that he became someone very special to me until he passed away a few years ago.
Macdella, can you share with us about these projects or developments that you are doing in Liberia today?
Right. So in 2003, I started Macdella Cooper Foundation. I went home and I just rescued a lot of children that once reminded me of that little Macdella that was living in a village where it was unwanted. No one wanted her. And she was just trying to eke out an existence. Of course, I had great-grandparents that took care of me, but those kids had no one to take care of them. And so I went and the foundation just rescued as many children as possible. And then we started putting them into orphanages. We care for those orphanages. Eventually, we built a boarding school where they could have their own beds, their access to 3 meals per day, and also have access to quality education, because the idea was to educate as many Liberians as possible. And so that became my passion. And so the Macdella Cooper Foundation for the past 17 to 20 years have been educating unwanted and abandoned children. But we now got some of those unwanted and abandoned children. We've changed their status, and they are now enrolled in the Notre Dame University. Notre Dame University is one of the world's largest universities, right? Who doesn't know Notre Dame? So now we took children off the street, put them in school for all these number of years, 10 years, whatever it was. And now they are enrolled in Notre Dame. And that to me says, good job, Macdella, good job, life well lived. And so the next phase is to now produce some students that will go to MIT. So technology is the future. And Africa has 1.3 billion people. A vast majority, about 60%, are young people living below the age of 35. They're considered youth. And those young people do not have the resources. Their nations don't have the resources within the operating budget to fund the ministries of education. So a lot of young people are going through life without access to their basic human rights of education. It is not a privilege, it's a right. And so a lot of young people in Africa are not educated. In my country alone, the adult literacy rate is about 37%. That's too low. More than half the country cannot read and write their own names. And so when people react, they react with violence. They react with things that someone who can use facts and data to back it, they'll realize, oh no, that's not true. But people go into civil wars, they go into conflicts because they don't use facts and data to back what conversation is being handed to them or news. So long story short, we want to produce, we now go into the phase of building the the Macdella Cooper Foundation Technology Village. And within the technology village, it's going to give young people, especially girls, access to technology, gaming, as we're in partnership with Olive World. And so Olive World is coming on board. Instead of young people playing and wasting time, they're going to play a game to learn about the environment, to learn about global warming. And then on the other side, we have a STEAM Academy, the STEAM Academy that will teach children about science, technology, and engineering, including the arts and math, so that these young people can learn how to produce gaming like Pablo and Olive World, the Olive World team, right? We don't want these 1.3 billion young people in Africa to just not be prepared for the technological challenges that's ahead of us. Because as you see, we all use smartphones today, but smartphones make us dumber because we depend on the technology, artificial intelligence, to remember everything for us. So we don't remember nothing anymore. We don't remember phone numbers, birthdays. If it's not in the calendar, we don't remember it. So we're dumbing down, and AIs, artificial intelligence, are making us dumber, and it's smarter than us. So we want African young people to also be in tune and in touch with the reality of the rest of the world, because we're a global community. We all have to speak the same language, from Norway to Liberia to Argentina. We all have to speak one language in this world in order for us to survive as a global citizen.
It's amazing to hear about the work. And would you say that that work really defines you as a person? Because there's a vast number of topics. So is there one topic that defines you as a person, or is the combination of topics into what we often call development in general?
Well, yes, development and understanding there's a global platform. And if you're not a competitive member of this global platform, you are left behind. You're just collecting the crumbs that falls off the table, right? And so I want to prepare young Africans or Africa as a continent to understand that there's a global language. We do have traditions, a lot of tradition, 55 states on the continent of Africa. But as we speak our local traditions, our religion, our culture, we also have to understand there's a global language that must be spoken, understood. And so the only way I feel we can do this is through education, is through technology. So yes, that's what defines Macdella Cooper, right? Mm-hmm. And it's not just feeding and clothing and housing underprivileged young people, but it's also getting them, once they're clothed, they're fed, they have housing, now they have to understand there's a global responsibility that each citizen has. Because we all own a portion of this real estate called Earth, we must take care of it. And that's why global warming is just not a Western issue. It's supposed to be an African issue as well. It's an Argentinian issue, is Latin American issue, it's Central American issue, it's European issue. And if we don't get the Africans on board, we got 1.4, almost 1.5 million people on the continent. They got to get with it. And so it's through education, we're going to make that leapfrog. We're going to leapfrog into the future.
Yes, there are certain topics that come together. No, this is technology, nature, social inclusion, all that, what you're talking about. We are all part of the same same house, the same world.
Right.
And to working together and to having these inspirational ideas, and not only the ideas, is like to go over with, like you do with the STEAM Good School for Girls. No? Right. And what when you think about a STEAM School for Girls that you are doing in Liberia, what are your when you see like 5 years ahead, which is your idea in Liberia or in Africa about, you have a schedule, you have an idea of the project, how it's going forward?
Well, our hope and dreams will be to get some of the students into some of the world-class agencies, maybe universities. We were able to get some students into Notre Dame. We'll hope to get a few students into MIT, right, or NJIT, whatever it is, or go to compete, or at least learn more from our global partners. And so this global exchange is so important to me that I was so privileged to have been brought to the United States, and the United States opened its doors to me. And my colleagues and friends in Europe opened their arms to me. I want to see that exchange take place. And so in 5 years, I want to see some young students, transfer into other universities, even if it's just a short-term exchange program, so their minds can be open that, people in Jonah's country exist, people in Pablo's country exist, and we all need to survive. If Africa has resources that will help people in Norway, in Argentina survive, hey, we have to trade, we have to connect, we have to share information. And so this is the global mindset I have. So in 5 years, I would like to see some of these students graduate, go on an exchange program, and come back to Africa to help develop Africa, not to stay abroad, but to come back. Because when one life like Macdella Cooper, a girl from the village, went overseas, saw what her friends, how they were living, and now I came back home and I was able to transform my community. If more young Africans were doing that, Africa would be a better place. Lack of corruption, because you understand in other countries, corruption is not a thing of the day. It exists in every country, but it's on a minute level. And we can't just have it as a normal thing. And it's horrible.
Yeah, and technology brought a huge advantage too, because we're all worldwide connected. There are some steps that we should go forward with connection in some places like Africa, not to be so expensive. So maybe with a satellite. Yeah, I heard that they are putting all the system in satellite in Amazon in Brazil, so they can be connected. So to bring this to Africa, it could be huge. And then as we have the mobile phones, that is in each place you have the bad thing and the good thing. Yeah, they have the two sides of the coin. And so I think it's very interesting how we can use technology today to go forward with this education that you want to provide in different places of Africa. So I think it's a good advantage, and it is very, very good that taking technology to the people in Africa, because it opens the world and communicate them with all the others. No, so it's great. Yeah.
Yeah, so maybe you could elaborate a little bit on the connection between technology and social inclusion, because it's you said that you went to America and saw what it was like, and then came back and said we can do something about this. But I mean, so you don't really have to actually go to see how the world is different in a different place, because you can see it through the screen on your phone. So if you could elaborate a little bit more on the connection between technology and social inclusion.
Well, technology, having access to technology, it's so important, especially when you talk about inclusion on all levels. What is inclusion in politics? Is inclusion in the national operating budget? Is inclusion, because look, we from Liberia, where I spend most of my time and where I'm from, I work in several different countries around Africa. But when you go to the villages and you see people living as if they're living in the early Stone Age days, and you go into other parts of the world and you see people with the advancement of technology, lack of information. Technology brings information to you. But when you have areas of the country where there's no infrastructure, people don't have access to internet. And so most people are left out of this whole information sharing. And information sharing is so critical, right? And it helps with inclusion, because when decisions are being made, and you don't have information, how are you, and they exclude you? So that's one little small example. And so we got to fix these problems. We got to connect the dots. And how do we connect the dots? Because what happens, people don't understand global warming is a serious issue because they don't have access to information. They don't understand that education was omitted from the operating budget when the government officials were crafting the budget, the national operating budget for the year. They left out education, or maybe they just give very little to education, or the Ministry of Information doesn't have the budget for so news, the antennas that even on, because in my country, Liberia, more people get information from the radio. And if the radios are not operating, if Ministry of Information are not giving out information, so technology brings all of that to play. During the Ebola, I think you remember the Ebola crisis of 2014, where we had to close down all the schools. We came up with the idea to give each child a phone. And on that phone, they were able to communicate with their teachers. They were able to get their assignment and return their assignment. And even now, fintech, technology. I sit here in New York and I send money to my staff to get work done because I'm not there with them for a minute. Now, there's some staff member that doesn't have access to technology. So I have to use somebody else to send money to them. So when you talk about how does inclusion, women in market, they have to leave their market to physically walk to a bank to be able to withdraw money. So technology, we talk about financial, fintech, financial technology, and even medical technology. There's so much that we have access to that people living in these who are not included are omitted from. When we do information on youth, sometimes we want to share information quickly. There are some young people who don't even have a cell phone on smartphone. not a smartphone. A lot of people in Liberia still don't have smartphones. And that's one of the Project Olive World and us we're trying to work on to collect as many smartphones as possible in order for the young people to have access to the game, is to give them those, even if it's semi-smartphone. There's some smartphone that's not super smart, it's not super intelligent, but at least to have the basics. And that's what we want. We want internet to become more affordable because the infrastructure is there in areas where the phone lines doesn't go or the cables doesn't go. People don't have access to internet, and they're living in the dark. They're living in the dark.
Macdella, this topic that you say about the smartphones, we are going to do it for sure. We are going to do it.
It's important.
And a nice news to share that we are developing great content for all Africa, but great. We have a whole team there working very, very hard. And one of these days we are going to share that. It's going to be a wonderful moment.
Can't wait.
Yeah,
it sounds very exciting. And everybody on the continent I'm talking to about this, they're very excited.
Yeah, no, we are very excited too. And there's every day we are having new people that they're joining. Now we are having some people from Singularity, from NASA, from different countries, and yeah, it's going very good. Macdella, if you think a message to give to a girl or a boy that is somewhere in this world that that feels marginalized, that feels alone, that it feels that it doesn't belong to this world, and it feels that that it feels unable to progress, which, because I think with all the experience you have, which would be this message to this person, to this girl, to this boy that is somewhere in this world and is hearing you today?
Oh, look, I spoke at a school just maybe a week or so ago, 2 weeks ago, and it was a school with a lot of well-to-do kids in a very wealthy area of the United States. And when I share my story of my journey, coming from nothing, you can't go that low. Anything after where I've gone, you can only go up. But you have to choose to decide if you go up, down. And I think to any young person that might be listening that feels they don't have a purpose, they don't have a call, I think everyone came to this earth to have a human experience, to accomplish and do something. Globally, we have one agenda, and every one of us have a role to play in it, all, but only if we decide to accept the call or not. Jonas is doing anthropology. He is solving a global problem. And some people might just be solving a portion of the global problem, right? And they might say, oh, this is too little. No, because that little bee that you're nurturing is going to open up a flower. And when I say flower, I'm just speaking in low terms. So that little bee you're working on, open up this flower, is inhaled by someone and inspire that person to create a world-changing event. We all have a purpose. And I know the early part of our lives, people tell us, oh, you're nothing, you're nobody, you're an abandoned child, you're nothing, or your parents have too much, you're never going to become anything because you just depend on your trust fund. Look, we all have a solution to the problems that we all came to this earth to. So whatever, it might just be creating a beautiful NFT art. It might be just creating a small technology that's going to ignite something in the universe. So I think the young people, they should not give up. They just keep searching for their purpose and don't stop until they find it, right? I could speak in so many different terms. If I was in a church right now, I would say I held on to God. And I told God, I'm not leaving you until you tell me why I'm on this earth. Because there's no way you brought me here to go through all of what I've gone through for nothing. You have got to have a reason for my existence. And I'm not leaving this moment, this place, until I know what I'm. And when I came out of that moment, my purpose was so clear. And people call me one-track minded, but when you find your purpose, you're so one-track minded. And even if nobody, even your parents don't believe in you, But if you believe in that thing that you feel is your purpose, you don't stop until you leave this world.
Love it, love it, love it. Thank you very much. Very good. And I hope many people around the world get this inspirational conversation that we had today and this message that you gave. It's a pleasure. It's a pleasure to have this meeting with you, Macdella, with Jonas today. And this is the first of many that we are going to keep on having in the future. So we will see us in the field, in the camp, working together, hand by hand. Okay.
That's right.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you,
Yeah,
Papa.
you too.
Thank you, guys.
Thank you.